So I'm taking a look at a game called Clandestine Anomaly. It's from a small Winnipeg-based studio called ZenFri, and it initially caught my attention because it's a very different type of game. It sort of tries to mix traditional tower defense gameplay with augmented reality, and then throws in some GPS location stuff for good measure. And it's a very strange title. So for instance, it takes your actual physical location, like where you live in the real world, and uses that as a game map, and then occasionally melds in features that force you to move to different physical locations in the real world in order to access parts of the game. And it's cool in theory, but in practice it gets kind of frustrating because sometimes you don't want to get up and go to a different block or go to a park or something like that in order to access one of the game's features. So in terms of how the game actually plays, the way it works sounds complicated on paper, as it does in my review, but in practice it's actually pretty simple. So you build these things called pulsars, and pulsars have these hexagonal spaces around them, and each space corresponds with a weapon. And then those weapons are used to try to take the aliens out that are invading the Earth. And there's an element of strategy here that's sort of like StarCraft or other real-time strategy titles where you have to manage your resources. You don't have an infinite amount of weapons that you can place in these hexagons. You have to move them to different areas, and you have to try to spread them out in order to take out the enemies and slow down their advance, because you don't want them to attack your generator. So there's also an augmented reality portion to the game as well, where you will hold your phone up and the game will take advantage of your camera and place enemies in the actual area where you're playing. So as you can see here, there's enemies flying around my actual apartment, and I'm taking them out. And this, it doesn't really have to be used. ZenFri sort of knows that you're not going to be able to be on the bus winging your phone around shooting invisible enemies. People are going to think that that's probably pretty strange. So this is kind of a bonus part of the game, and it's cool, but it doesn't really fit in with the tower defense feel, and I didn't find it all that useful unless I was really in a big jam and I was getting overloaded by enemies. Jumping into that mode helped me sort of clear out a path and buy me some time to either repair my pulsars or build more, or build enough so that I could reach the portal where the enemies spawn from. And that's often the ultimate goal, is to make it to that portal so that you can kill it and stop the advance of your foes. So that's a little bit of an overview about ZenFri's latest title. It's definitely ambitious, it's definitely super cool, and it does a lot of different things that most games don't do. And I do think that augmented reality is important, and that in many ways it's the future of how we're going to play a lot of games, and that's part of why this title caught my attention. But the problem is I think the studio might have bitten off a little more than it can chew. It almost seems like there's so many cool ideas in this title that they didn't end up creating a cohesive, fun gameplay experience. That's not to say that it's a bad game. It definitely has some flaws, as you'll see in my written review, but it's far from one of the better titles on the iOS App Store. So that's it for my overview. You can find my full review on mobileserve.com.